Designing an incredible space requires passion, talent, but most importantly, knowledge. And knowledge about so many things for sure. But if we go back to basics, the very first thing that you need to know before you design any type of space is the principles of design. Making a space look cohesive and put together is not always an easy thing to do. However, knowing the principles of interior design will ensure that you are creating a well-designed interior, and it'll also show that you know what you're doing. So if you want to know what these are, keep watching and let's get right into it. You can use the timestamps down in the description of this video to jump ahead to the principle that you want to learn more about. Balance in interior design creates a sense of equilibrium and stability. The basic definition of balance is the equal distribution of weight. And guys, this principle is very important no matter what type of interior space you are creating. This is a principle that you must use every single time. We have 3 types of balance. The first one is the easiest one, and that is symmetrical balance. So basically, what you put on one side, you put on the other. End of the story. This one is very easy to achieve because you are kind of creating a mirror effect with your design. So this type of symmetrical balance is a very much safer approach than the other one that I'm going to mention in just a bit, but it can be counterproductive as well, because if you make space too symmetrical, it can result in a very boring and plain design, which is something that you don't want. The second type of balance that you can create is asymmetrical balance. So asymmetrical balance is a little bit more tricky and it requires of a little bit more thought to get it right. So basically guys, every element or every piece of furniture, every color, every texture, everything has some sort of visual weight. So this weight should be considered when you are adding elements into your space. For example, a crowded pattern will visually weight more than a plain pattern. Also, darker colors are considered visually heavier than lighter ones. And of course, objects that are physically bigger, which are of course heavier, they also have a heavier visual weight, if that makes any sense. So for example, if you are adding a couch or a sofa on one side of your living room, how are you gonna offset this weight? Instead of putting one chair on the other side, you might wanna put 2 chairs instead, so that the space looks balanced. Asymmetrical balance can be a little harder to achieve because you're basically playing with many different types of objects and you are still trying to create this balance within the space. Okay guys, so before I give you the definition of scale and proportion, I just want to remind you that these 2 concepts do not mean the same thing. They are sometimes used interchangeably, but although they should be considered together when you are designing spaces, they mean 2 different things. So first, let's talk about the meaning of scale. Scale refers to the size of an object and how it refers to something else. Something else for interior designers would be either an interior space or either a person. So when you're talking about scale, you are comparing an object to the size of the room that it's gonna be placed on, and also you are comparing that object to human scale. Because basically everything that it's created in a way that it's easy to use for us and for our size in relation to that object. So let me give you an example. This sofa is too big in comparison to the size of the room. So it basically means that it's out of scale for this specific room. Another example would be this lamp. This lamp is too big for both for the size of the room that it's placed on, but it's also too big in comparison to human scale. So scale is really important when you are adding elements into your space, because if you add things that are out of scale, it's just gonna look awkward and very odd. So now I'm gonna give you the definition of proportion. So it refers to the relationships of the sizes of two or more parts of a whole. I also have another definition, which I will also give you, and that is, proportion is the ratio or the fraction of one part to another part, or of one part to the whole. Don't worry if you didn't understand a word of what I just said. I'm gonna break it all down for you. So basically, guys, what this means is if you were to take an item, so for example, a chair, right? A chair is an item. So you take a chair and you analyze all the parts of that chair. You analyze the backrest, the armrest, the seat, the legs. All these parts of a whole, which is a chair, should be in proportion to each other and in proportion to the overall size of the chair. If something is out of proportion, it's just gonna look very odd. So a very easy way to identify an object and whether it has the right proportion is by just looking at it. Is everything looking okay? Does anything look odd or distorted? Does it just look weird to you? If an object does not look realistic, it means that the proportions are wrong. A common example where interior designers use the principle of proportion is when we are choosing lampshades. Another common example would be when we are selecting nightstands or coffee tables and we want to put a table lamp on top of it. The coffee table or the nightstand should be in proportion to the size of the lamp. Although the coffee table and the lamp are two different objects, they are supposed to create a group, which is part of your design. So these two objects should be in proportion to each other so that they don't look weird or awkward. So I'm gonna show you 3 images and you can try to guess which is the image that has the right proportions and which are the 2 images that have the wrong proportions. If you wanna know the answer, stay till the end of this video. So these 2 principles go hand in hand because the way that you create rhythm is by using a repeating pattern in your design. Repetition is when an element is used more than once throughout your design. I talk about how repetition has been used for centuries in this video right here, so you can check that out if you're interested. So the purpose of this principle is to move your eyes around a room, and they are most of the times implemented to create this sense of movement and excitement inside a space. Adding emphasis to a room basically means to create a focus within a designed area of your space. So you are giving higher importance to a specific area or to a specific piece of furniture, to a specific element. Emphasis is creating a focal point where your eyes are going to be drawn to that specific element or to that specific part of the design first. And all the other elements that you add, such as furniture, should be facing or should be surrounding that focal point. Adding contrast is basically the process of mixing and matching materials. It means to add 2 or more elements of very different characteristics, if not opposite characteristics. The easiest way to think about contrast is by using darker color versus lighter color. You can also use contrast using 2 different, very different types of textures, 2 different types of opacities. Contrast is very important in interior design. It adds a lot of interest to a space that can be too plain. Guys, these 2 principles are very important and they always work together to create a space that feels just right. Harmony, guys, is when all of the elements that are within your space, whether that's furniture, rugs, materials. Everything is fitting together to create this sense of harmony within the space. So everything has its own place, and the items and everything that you put in there, I feel like I'm saying everything too much. But anyway, everything is just complementing each other and it just feels right. Unity, on the other hand, is creating a design that feels cohesive. So the way that you can do this is by, for example, implementing a consistent type of furniture styles, or by adhering to a certain color scheme. So unity is when you are creating a space that it's all united and unified so that it feels one single space. This is a principle that I don't hear a lot of people talking about, but I think it's a very interesting and unique principle of design. So we have already talked about contrast as well as repetition. So variety is when you have a repeating pattern in your design and then you add a pop of contrast within that pattern that creates a sense of variety and interest within your space. I know this is probably not making any sense. So think of variety as the point where this repeating pattern or this repetition that you have in your design is broken by one element. So I'm going to show you some examples to explain this principle. This image right here, although it's nothing related to interior design, explains perfectly the principle of variety. And the whole reason that people use variety is to break with this repeating pattern that may become a little bit too boring. So I think it's a very interesting way of creating something very unique. Guys, those were the principles of interior design. I hope that this video was helpful for you. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on my Instagram. Like this video if you found it useful. I will see you guys next week. Bye bye.